Another one, she says, quote, "I took my husband and kids with me so they don't have to feel my selfish act. They will sleep until Christ resurrects them. I truly hope you do better where I have failed." End quote. So again, she's taking them with her, and in an effort to help them to not have to feel the loss of losing her. It's just such a bizarre headspace to be in for her at that point. Now, looking back, about 6 weeks prior to this day, Lauren was reportedly becoming very increasingly preoccupied with the end times. It was something that she had been really, really studying. She was studying her scriptures, reading a lot of books, and she was still very active with the Jehovah's Witnesses beliefs. And she very much still had her faith in everything that the church teaches. Just because she had been ostracized and put out of the church and put out of that community didn't mean that all of those beliefs went away. And she truly felt as if the Armageddon were coming any day. And one thing that I learned through this, I didn't realize that this is the case, but in the Jehovah's Witness faith, they believe that actually only those who die before the Armageddon will be saved. So that was why it was becoming such a huge worry for Lauren, as she was believing that the end times were coming. It could be any moment when it was going to happen. And as the end of the world was growing more imminent, so was her fear of what was going to happen to her family. And so by killing her family, there was a part of her that believed that she was providing them the assurance of salvation. She believed it was truly the only way. Her friend Joyce had spoken with Lauren about 6 weeks prior to the killings, and she said that Lauren was just incredibly uneasy and saying, "It's the end times. I know it is. I know it's the end. I know Armageddon is coming." And she was just very, very convinced that something bad was going to happen, and she was very, very worried about what was going to happen to her family. Joyce Taylor had actually seen her just a couple of weeks before this all happened and said that Lauren had become even more preoccupied than she had been a few weeks prior to that. And that at that point, she had a very vacant look in her eyes and was clearly becoming so emotionally distraught at that point that it was very, very visible. Now, she just described it as being such an eerie feeling and just not really knowing how to help, but she knew that Lauren needed help. She believes that it was a mixture of Lauren's lifelong struggle with depression, plus all of the fears that religion had planted inside of her, and that the two just combined for this horrible mixture, and that the fear that was creating in her and it was just growing just really, really made her somebody that wasn't very rational. Joyce also believed that by being ostracized from the church, it played a huge part in the building of hopelessness and desperation that Lauren had been experiencing. And look, I can believe that. I mean, if you are ostracized for so long from everyone and you really have nobody to turn to, very little family, very few friends, and you just really don't have anybody to talk to, and all of these fears are within you and you just keep growing and growing, and there's a part of that religious shame and guilt and fear and everything else in her that just keeps growing. And so I can totally get behind the fact that that might have played a part in this. Other friends placed the responsibility solely on depression, saying that religion played absolutely no part in these killings and that it was due to Lauren being depressed and feeling hopeless because of that. So I just really am interested on hearing your thoughts. Like I said, I can absolutely see both sides. I can see a combination of the two things mixing to create the perfect storm in her, and something that just grew to be an irrational fear within her. So I would love to hear your thoughts. And I would love to hear from those of you who are in the Jehovah's Witness faith or have come out of the church. I would just love to hear your stories. And so let me know. Let me know if you have any stories. If you do have some things that kind of go hand in hand, or if you have thoughts that are completely opposite, I would love to hear that too. It just seems to me that Lauren really had that support system when she was in the church. And when she was ostracized, it was kind of ripped away from her. And it never seemed like she was able to accept herself or find new friends or find her way in a social area after that. And so it just really makes me think that maybe she didn't have anybody to talk to at that point. Now, obviously, there are major signs of depression prior to this incident, and I do urge you that if you are feeling any sort of depression, reach out. Honestly, the best thing that I ever did was making that call to a therapist saying, hey, I need help. I need to get in. It's just such a liberating feeling. So if you're on the fence of wondering if you should or shouldn't do it, I encourage you, go see somebody, go talk to somebody, whoever the case may be, but find the help. So that's all I have for you with this story, and thank you so much for joining me.
Hello, folk music fans. Gordon Lightfoot is one of the greatest folk rock artists ever, and now there's a podcast celebrating and discussing his work song by song. It's called Carefree Highway Revisited, and every episode, your host, that's me, Mike Messner, will examine one of Gordon's songs with the help of a special guest. So, if that's your cup of tea, why don't you follow us on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or TuneIn? That's Carefree Highway Revisited.
I know that October is over and thus the Domestic Violence Awareness Month has ended, but I just think we can recognize those who have lost their lives due to domestic violence any month of the year. So I do have one more story for you here tonight, and this one was one that really stuck out to me. It was just a very, just really sad story. So this one is taken from the YWCA of Sweetwater County page on Facebook as well, where all of these have come from. And it's a local YWCA page here in my community. It says Laura was nursing her 19-day-old infant daughter when she saw her husband Grant pointing a gun at her. She quickly bent over to protect their child and was shot in the top of her head. Laura Kate Sporick was born in Mesa, Arizona. The oldest of 6 children, she was like a second mother to her younger sisters and brother, always the protector and always the peacemaker. She loved animals, the outdoors, camping, fishing, and hiking. She was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. She was an accomplished violinist who participated in many talent shows, road shows, and dance festivals. She loved flying and was a member of the Air Force ROTC. She was a beautiful, tall, young lady with a positive outlook on life. When Laura was 15, she met Grant Bossa, who was 24. He coerced her into running away with him, and she became pregnant with their first child. When they were married, he was 4 hours late for the wedding. He moved Laura to Tucson to separate her from her family and would not allow her to have a phone or to use the car. He frequently attacked her religious beliefs. He lied to her. To get by, Laura reestablished herself in the church. This angered Grant, and he became progressively more violent, becoming physically and verbally abusive when she was pregnant with their second child. He was arrested for assault, but each time she tried to leave him, he threatened to take her child. When she was pregnant again, there were many incidents of abuse, and Laura obtained a protection order from the court because she feared for her life. We, as Laura's family, hope and pray that her death will stand as a silent witness that women everywhere will someday never have to be afraid of being beaten or murdered by their spouse. Hashtag Silent Witness Wyoming. Hashtag Remember My Name. Hashtag Remember My Story. So tonight we remember Laura Bossa, who was 22 years old and lived in Green River, Wyoming. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you so much. Please share stories. I would love to hear stories and be able to honor those who have been lost, and not just in domestic violence situations, but if you have a person that you have lost and you want to honor them, please send that to me as well. And you can always do that on Twitter, Instagram. Those are the two that I use the most, or sinisterstoryhour@gmail.com. So thank you so much, and just really am very grateful for all of the listeners, 29 countries now. I love that. That's so cool to me to have people from Brazil and Iran and Bangladesh and all kinds of places that are now listening. And I just really thank you. And I will be back next week with another crime and another story for hashtag Remember My Story. Good night. Thank you for listening, everybody. We will see you next time on Sinister Story Hour.